All right. Good evening. We are live. This is Amuna Yisrael. Man, look, I pray everybody's doing well. For those who just joined us, like, subscribe, do all that beautiful, lovely stuff. I was messing around over there on Lifetime. Y'all know I don't really be having time for this. I was over there doing the R. Kelly study, revisiting some things so I could update the. Anyway, that stuff started getting to me, man. I had to take a break. And then I happened to see this, which is still heavy, but not as heavy as the R. Kelly stuff. And so I said, you know what? Let's share my information and some feedback on some of the things that we've been talking about over the years, which is trauma bonds. So anytime I see a perfect example to illustrate, and as well as Uncle Tom's Cabin was getting to me too, I had to take a day off, like I said, just to detox the mind. And then from there, I said, let me build my way back up. So we're going to talk about this hopelessly in love conversation. It seems to be a series that is on TLC. Um, I find problem in the title off the bat. There's this thought process in the world that, you know, of what love looks like, certain words that we attach to love. And, down the road, even though it's unhealthy and it compromises the integrity of the individual and the family, they're still making it seem like, it's some Bonnie and Clyde, something to aspire to. And it definitely isn't. So this hopelessly in love thing is problematic. What it really is trauma bond. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to play a little bit from it, but I want to read Trauma Bond first because I found the documentary very helpful in illustrating what generational cycles look like, how it affects different family members differently, and how it manifests and play itself out. So before I start, for those who may not be familiar with what a trauma bond is, a trauma bond is loyalty to a person who is destructive. While the idea of bonding tends to bring up connotations of something good and beneficial, usually when people have a bond, they say, oh, that person, I got love for this person, doesn't necessarily mean that that bond is good and healthy. It says trauma bonds are unhealthy. According to Patrick Carnes in his book Betrayal Bonds, there are a number of signs that a person is involved in an unhealthy bond with a partner or other significant person. Here are some thoughts to consider determining if you are in a trauma bond, and they go on. So basically, it's a destructive bond that bonds you to a person in an unhealthy way. So based on what we've seen, oh, you haven't seen it yet. I don't know if you've seen it yet. So based on what I was able to see or ascertain from this discussion, Lisa seemed to be like she was on a journey to begin to understand her own darkness and her own pain. So all we can do is really look at spectators and kind of try to get an understanding from that perspective. Uh, Her unhealthy exposure was with her father, but I'll let them kind of tell it a little bit in their own words. I'm just going to play and stop so that we can see the connected dots. I think this documentary, even though they didn't say, hey, I'm connecting these dots, I guess the way I'm watching it, I was like, wow, they were collecting a lot of dots. But if you're just looking at it for, oh, it's the juice of what really happened in this star's life, you may miss it. You know what I mean? So my point is like, don't miss it because this is happening to everyday people all the time. So I'll play a little bit. It's only audio, y'all. It's only audio because you know how YouTube do. Hold on. I didn't cue it up right. I didn't cue it up right. Hold on. We grew up in Philly. Lisa was the oldest. Then there was me, and then my brother Ronald. We lived with my mom and my dad. Okay, so that's Lisa's younger sister, looked just like her. That's her younger sister giving like the backdrop of how they grew up, where they grew up in Philly, X, Y, and Z. My husband was in the military, and we traveled a lot, so they were pretty much raised abroad, different army bases and stuff like that. Me and her father, we met in high school. That's at the time they were drafting the Vietnam War. He did play several instruments. He was drafted, but he was able to enlist in the army band. We were so much in love, so we got married. There's so much compacted in there. There's so much that's going on in there. Somebody's being drafted. That means this against their will to go and fight a war that's not of their choosing. Um, so there's going to be some resentment there. There's going to be some indifference there. They were young. That's another thing. So if they have um, unresolved issues in their own young teenage lives out of high school, 17, 18, 19 years old, then they're not going to have the coping mechanisms to deal with relationships and more so problematic relationships, right? Because they haven't yet developed those skills.
And our families lived close together. We lived in the Logan area of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As we got older, Lisa would tell different stories. I know when they moved to Philadelphia and they lived with their father, and I kind of like learned the situation about her father being abusive to her mom. I was kind of like, I wanted her to just always be at our house, her and Raindrop.
So they had an abusive father. All of this thing added up. We're later going to find out that the father, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of the foundation so that you could kind of be up to speed about the stuff that I'm going to share. But so essentially, the father now in his young age, with a family, he's now turning to alcohol and has become abusive to his wife in the presence of the children.
I remember my father and my mother's relationship, just a lot of abuse. It seems like it was daily as a child. I just remember my dad telling us fathers were not put on this earth to love their children, just to discipline them.
And I think that's a key also, based on the stuff that you're going to hear later on. What I'm saying is when I tell people go back and talk to your parents, go back and talk to your grandparents, because you may be experiencing something in your life and you may have thought that it started with you. You may be experiencing something in your life that is plaguing you for years and decades. It's robbing you of your joy, it's robbing you of your peace, it's robbing you of your life, and you don't know why, right? And you don't realize that you're stuck in a cycle. And if you don't take the time to go back to understand what cycle that may be, you can go well into your old age still tripping off of some stuff that you inherited. This spiritual curses that you inherited, this behavioral patterns that you inherited, and you will maybe not know because. So that's why I found value in what they did. They brought the mother, they brought the sister, and they kind of giving the background of the family that this young lady came from.
With my dad, he was.
Oh yeah, I wanted to say that also about the father. The standpoint of the father is you don't. Fathers are here to discipline, and if you notice later on in this relationship, as the documentary goes on, she is doing whatever it takes to get the approval of the man, Andre Reisen, right? She's doing what looking to get that validation. She's looking to get um, what her father didn't give her. So there's a huge void there, but I don't want to go ahead of myself, but I just wanted to take note of that.
For real. Oh yeah. When you would come home, I don't care if it was 3 in the morning. If it was something that was a rain, he wake us up. Where's Ronald? Where's Ronald? Get downstairs right now. We would jump out the bed and we would run downstairs and we would line up like soldiers. What? We would line up.
So basically, it sounds like he had PTSD, where now he's treating his children the same way that he was traumatized in the army and not really seeing anything wrong with that. Sometimes when people are abused, they look for someone else that is of lesser rank than they are to abuse them, right? So that you can now feel empowered because somebody else robbed you of your power, right? So, man.
Chest out straight like this. And he would walk.
Hold on, let me go a little forward.
Get in an abusive relationship. I'm getting abused. You didn't trying to make her believe that he was going to change and all this. That it was good for all.
Hold on, my bad. I missed my spot.
My father was so abusive. I just remember when this movie came out called The Burning Bed.
I had to go look that up. She's saying that there was a movie that came out called The Burning Bed. It was based on a real story starring Farrah Fawcett. Now, I was a young little one, so I don't remember seeing this video. But apparently they were like, 10, 11, 12. They're about. This movie comes out about 84, 85. So also, it's important to know that the things that we watch is they say, oh, it's just entertainment. Oh, it's just media. Oh, it's so harmless, right? So these two young girls are watching this movie. And what happens in this movie is that this woman is in an abusive relationship, right? And there comes a point where she can no longer take the abuse. And she ultimately lights the, bed around the abuser on fire and it consumes him. Does that sound familiar? So the younger sister is saying that they were fixated as children because they identified with the abuse that their mother was experiencing and they were witnessing. They were thinking that if they can, let me let her say it in her words.
As a child, me and Lisa, would talk about doing that to my dad.
Okay, so take note. She and Lisa would talk about doing that, quote that, and that is the burning bed scenario to their father so that they could be free. Later on, Lisa gets in. She manifests a abusive relationship, and when she is compromised in that relationship and can take no more and wants to be free, she connects in some way, which her sister will say that she connects back to, and her sister says it was just like the burning bed. So the things that we take in and we ingest, they don't really go anywhere.
Because then we'll be free from all the fear and, violence and abuse.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to
guess
put.
eventually I couldn't take no more because I didn't want my children, they would be crying and stuff like that. So I took the kids to Pensacola, Florida.
Okay, I wanted to stop it right there. So that's the mother saying she couldn't take no more. So you have the young children exposed to abuse, young adults not able to cope with their issues. And they're saying this is hopelessly in love, right? This is setting the stage for what they're calling hopelessly in love. No, it's called a trauma bond. It's toxic love based on many things, right? So let's jump a little bit to what I observed and what they shared about Andre Rison, which is that they had also similar things in common, meaning her father was in the military, his father was in the military, her father died, was murdered, his father was murdered. So they had a lot of trauma bonds. Like people are connected, like two people who may be in jail together. The jail is not a good situation, but they bond over their incarceration, or they bond over the fact that they were military buddies and that they were, what I mean, they were in combat together. So even if you probably didn't like the person, the fact that you endured this traumatic situation with them forges this trauma bond. What was I going to say? And this thing is so very interesting. And so I think if we call it what it is, um, if we call it what it is, the fact that they moved around a lot and the people who knew of her, he said that, and I found this weird until I went back. I had to listen to it twice. I went back and listened to what the mother said, the fact that they moved around a lot when they were little. Andre Rison says they were like, well, how did you guys get together? According to him and his sister, who, his sister seemed a bit, extracurricular in a grown man's life, but that's another story. She says they said that she came to the house and never left. And I'm like, that's very interesting. That's not normal. By this time you're in the group, you're doing, you know what I mean? But for you to just detach from wherever you are and to come to a stranger's house, you know, and just never leave, it lends to some of the experience that she had before, which running away from home, not feeling comfortable, not feeling stable, and looking to fill a void. Right? So again, when we have these voids, it's not love. Trust me. We think it's love, but when it doesn't go the way we want to, then we react adversely. You may not burn teddy bears and sneakers in a tub, but you may do other things that may harm the other person or yourself, because we're looking for what we think is love we're looking for someone else to fill a void that they didn't create. Really, it was her father. Her sister goes on to say, let me see what her sister goes on to say that she was more inclined, Lisa was, towards her father, even though the father was abusive. So the sister goes on to say that, oh, hold on. We were back. The sister goes on to say that she didn't get in an abusive relationship, but Lisa did. And I could see why if she was more inclined to, hold on, stop it now. She was more inclined towards the father and looking for the approval for the father. So what worsened it, according to the narrative, I mean, is that the father dies on this very same day that she signs her first record deal. So if you have a parent or a guardian who doesn't give you the boost of confidence that you need and creates a void within you, and you're doing this, a lot of children are doing things to prove to their parents that you're worthy of their respect, you're worthy of their adoration. This is what a lot of children want to do. You want to hear a good job. And so the simple fact that she was never able to hear him from the person who, even though he was abusive, she respected, she went about it in different ways. And when it wasn't fulfilling, which it wasn't, according to the narrative, she became discontent with just the fame, or became discontent with what other people said that she should have. I find there's a lot going on out here today. There's a lot going on out here today. The children are on level 10 out there. I got the cousins is here, so they're a little bit on level 10, but it's all right. We're going to rock with it. I'm not going to stay too long. I just wanted to just touch on some of the things. If you haven't seen it and you are going to see it, see it how you want to see it. There's just so many keys, so many jewels, and so many things to learn from, and how our life mirrors the life of those who've come before us, who've set certain patterns, and how we go after things thinking, oh, this is meant to be. Oh, this is exactly where I need to be. Just looking for these little signs. There was a song back in the day. I think it was Cameron who sung the song. And the song's like, and I was like, me too. And I said, me too. It's like you looking for something to identify with, somebody who we think is going to understand our plight and our trouble. And then we mistake that for a healthy connection. You know what I mean? And we hold on to it because it makes us feel comfortable. But that all that does is just keeps us in a state of limbo when we begin to actually grow, when we begin to actually realize, okay, this is not good. What I also found interesting, like I said, I'm gonna keep this short, is that according to her in an interview, it wasn't given on this documentary, but in an interview, she was on and off for 8, 9 years, I think, however long, with Andre Rison. And she said when he finally decided to act right, and when he finally stopped messing with the women, she lost interest. And she goes on to talk about how it was no longer challenging for her. So there was something that sometimes we use people to vicariously fix someone else. So I have theories, right? So if you experience as a child, which her sister said they did, violence, and her mother said they did, and she says they visualize and they experience seeing abuse. And as a child, you say stuff like, if it was me, I would do this, right? And if I had an opportunity, I would do that. They happen to see this show and say, if it was them, they would set fire. She actually does this. In a similar abusive relationship, she sets fire. So sometimes you're trying to fix the fault of your past, or the fault of your parent, or the fault of your mother, or the fault of your father. You attract to the mate who has that similar quality, and then you try to fix it in them. And so I found her response telling that once she felt that there's no longer a struggle, there wasn't anything to fix anymore, she lost interest. It was no longer intriguing. It was no longer a project that she needed to do. And from there, she disconnects and moves on. Very, very interesting stuff. For those who just joined us, I think I'm renaming this documentary series not Hopelessly in Love, Trauma Bonds. Because that's exactly what it is, man. Trauma bonds, things that we have inherited and we're working out from generation to generation. And just like viruses, they mutate. So it may not look the exact same. Her mother may have been getting beat and she decided to fight back. Because maybe in her mind, she's saying, if it was me, I would fight him back. And so you have police reports of her actually engaging and fighting him, because that may have been something she internalized. Like, I'm not just going to sit there and let this happen. Because later on, she says something about her mother saying, I didn't know that she was that strong. I didn't know that until later. So a lot of times with these children who experience trauma or abusive relationships, they identify with the person who sometimes is winning. It depends on the individual. Like if the person is abusive but they're winning in that abuse, then they would identify with that person. And the weak person or the abused is the person that you don't want to become, depending on the child. You know what I mean? And so that that causes you to carry that mentality forward. And then you put on it, you know how people would be like, oh, what I would have said was. And so when you're in that situation, you're reflecting back on the past, and now you're bringing it to the forward to say, I'm not going to be like she was weak. So if I get in an abusive relationship, I'm going to fight. This is what I'm going to do. And you see that kind of play out in this Lisa Left Eye conversation. But let me just read this trauma bond thing real quick. I'm just reading once again, because if we don't take anything away from these discussions, then to me it will be fruitless, because we're just coming for hype. And you know what I mean, somebody went through the trouble of sharing their experiences, exposing their pain and their hurt, and for us to just think it's like, oh, this person said this in the interview and this person said that. I'm like, come on, it's something to be learned. So anywho, trauma bond. I'll read it again for those who just came. Trauma bonding is loyalty to a person who's destructive. Oh, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't. And let me see. It was something I wanted to read. One second. I forgot the name of the song. This is the first time I ever heard this particular song. A new star is born. I've never heard this thing. I just actually listened to it. And when this new star is born song speaks to who she held in high esteem, regardless of the fact that he was abusive, which is her father. Let me go read this little part. In the song, she says, let me just jump down. So, Dad, I know you're listening. How you been? Oh, I'm doing fine, just passing time, submerged in my sins. Sometimes I take a bath and just get a little dirty again. I try to cleanse my mind, cleanse my soul, and get it into a place you've been. No, I'm not trying to rush anything. I just want to visit you because I miss you. So what you trying to say? So this is like saying, well, she's not having suicidal idealization, but the way her father died, she wasn't prepared for it because it was sudden, and she was attached to him even though he was abusive, and so she's kind of still mourning in a way over him, and using music to kind of communicate. And according to her, she would have dreams of her father who said to her, stop calling me, either come where I am or stop or leave me alone. So I found that interesting, but I'm gonna keep reading. She says, no, I'm not trying to rush anything, meaning death. I just want to visit you because I miss you. So what you trying to say? My imagination been wilding since I've been a child, and since you're laughing, then I take it that good things are happening. Hold on one second. Then she goes on to say, because she said that he never had an opportunity to see, she never had the opportunity to make him proud, to show that, hey, I made it. The last he knew of her, she ran off to Georgia, and he didn't get an opportunity to see that she made it. Quote, made it. She goes on to say, well, I'm sure you already know this. I'm a big pop star, and my pops is a star. Now you really are. Sometimes I feel like an anus, she says. I kind of made you a little famous. Listen to this. Always spilling my guts, explaining to these people who think I'm nuts. Told them how you and moms knuckled up. Meaning she talked about the abusive household she came from. My excuse for being such a disrupt. Yeah, they sure did. They called you an abusive drunk. Sorry, I didn't realize the media would run with it, but now I know, and sometimes I try to have fun with it. Very, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. And given the fact that she's an artist, we're able to read her thoughts, something that many people don't have an opportunity to do because they don't write it down. Good evening, Queety. They don't write it down. They don't express. This is why I say it's important. You don't have to be an artist or a poet. Write down certain things that otherwise else would just be trapped in your thoughts, or trapped in your soul, or trapped inside of you. And not giving birth to it, not seeing what it is and understanding what it is, it robs you of the opportunity to work through that trauma. So in her realization, looking backward, she was pining over her father. She was manifesting the abusive relationships that she had witnessed, and she was unwilling to let him go. You know what I mean? Even though he was abusive, that's the same thing that happened her with her and Andre Rison, until she came to the point where, according to her, it was no longer a challenge. Let me see, is there anything else I wanted to touch on before I go? Oh yeah, I was reading Trombone. My bad. Okay. Trauma bonds have repetitive, damaging fights, unable to detach. Even though you can't trust a person, you find yourself missing them to the point of longing that is so awful. When you try to leave the person, you end up going back, even though it's abusive. That's not hopelessly in love, y'all. That's toxicity. That's trauma bonds. You feel stuck because the other person keeps doing destructive things, but you believe there is nothing you can do about it. Others seem disturbed, like people looking on. And you had that all throughout this documentary, that after she burnt down the bathroom the first time, they were looking like, okay, this is weird. And then when she burnt down the house the second time, everybody's like, what? You still with this person? So he also was bonded to her because he had his own issues that he was going on with. So they were both kind of trauma bonded to each other. And that explains why it was so volatile. Um, It says usually trauma bondings occur in relationships involving inconsistent reinforcement, such as those with addicts and alcoholics, or in domestic violence situations. And according to the narrative, Lisa's father was both an alcoholic and, engaged in domestic violence. Dysfunctional marriages is also called trauma bonds because there is always a time when things seem to, quote, be normal. Other types of relationships involving trauma bonds include cult-like religious organizations, kidnapping and hostage situations, where a lot of people call it Stockholms, and those involving child abuse or incest and unhealthy work environments. The environment necessary to create a trauma bond involves intensity, complexity, inconsistency, and a promise. Well, I'll never leave you. It's always going to be me and you. You know what I'm saying? Bonnie and Clyde, all this other kind of conversation. Victims stay because they're holding on to that elusive promise, quote unquote, or hope. There is always manipulation involved. Victims are prey to the manipulation because they are willing to tolerate anything for the payoff. And usually the payoff, why it's so alluring, is because it's a deep injury. It's a deep soul injury that the payoff is supposed to, fill up. It's a deep injury. In her case, it was the void of her father. So whatever that promise is, whatever that conversation is enough for the person to overlook all of what's going on and say they want to stay and stick it out. They said, which is elusive promise and ever-present hope for fulfillment of some deeply personal need within the victim. And I just said that. So often those in a traumatic relationship are looking right at it, but can't see it because they're blinded. I just put the blended part. Only after time away from an unhealthy attachment can a person begin to see the destruction it caused. In essence, people need to, quote unquote, detox. And this is where you see a lot of her going into the bush, needing to go to amongst Dr. Sabi's. Is exactly what she was doing. She went amongst Dr. Sabi's. She went to Honduras many times. She said that she was trying to detox from trauma bonds by breaking them and staying away from the relationship. So yeah, that was just a quick little article on trauma bonds. But I say that to say, let us not believe the hype. I know they probably have other articles or other documentaries that come out. It's one thing to just have it for entertainment, but it's another thing to be looking at it and be like, yeah, that's messed up. And you your child, your daughter, your brother, your somebody may be in this similar situation, doesn't have all the cameras on them, and you don't have the information to be able to say, hey, bro, hey, sis, hey, such, you may want to look into this. You know what I mean? You may be able to get them a book or slide them an article or email them something that's going to help them along the way. And that's why I think this type of information is important, because we are seeing this. We're in your coworker, in somebody, and you don't know how to address it. You don't know what the root cause of it is. So you don't know how to help them through it, or even give them the tools or offer them the tools that they need, because you don't know what it is. We say stuff like, yeah, that's crazy. Or yeah, they really love each other. Oh yeah, they hopelessly in love. They crazy, looking so crazy in love. We say all of this stuff to make it seem like, it's the article said, seem normal. It's not normal. It's not normal for many reasons, right? So if we don't know what the allure is, and we say stuff like, girl, you need to leave him because he ain't no blah, 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 she's going to be over there like, oh, you don't understand. And you're going to push her further into the arms of a place that's not good for her. Same thing is with the male. You push him further into the arms of the person who's destroying him, because you don't understand how to approach it. You don't understand how to approach it. So there's a technique, and that technique comes through education and information to see what it is that you're looking at. And when you look at this story and you look at the beginning to the end and you hear what everyone is saying, you're like, wow, okay, that's exactly why it came back again, because you held on to, and furthermore than that, she held on to the thought of the father from the vantage point of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old. So even when by the time you get to your 20s, you're still looking at the situation as a prepubescent adolescent, or you're still looking at the situation as a teenager. You understand? And what you would have done in your mind. Let me see if I can get what the sister says later on. Because the sister says, man, the sister was standing right beside her, which I found to be wild, because the sister was standing right beside her, the same sister that they talked about burning the bed so that they could be free from the tyrant, the father, is the same sister who was standing beside her when she started burning the shoes in the tub, and you know what I mean? She's the same one who said that she was kind of like Lisa was in a daze and she had to pull her out like, yo, let's go. And that's wild, given that those were the same two who were there in one abusive space, and now the sister is witnessing her elder sister being abused in a similar manner. Just being a business and no longer. Hold on, y'all. Let me try to do some skip here. And so I said, man, just go look. Hold on. I came and it was like, boom, oh, wow. You know. Have money in there, not a lot of money, but money to use it. Hold on. How you guys doing? And I know Pac happened to be there. He was there as a presenter and as a nominee. How's everybody doing? Is it making? You're done with all your bull crap. I'm done with mine. Let's make it happen. Is it making sense? So, because I figured she was just looking through a dark glass and it just needed to clear up. I miss my time markers, y'all. I usually write this stuff down. I was in the club. I was sitting next to a guy, and he was like, ended up dying. Hold on. Nah, I didn't. He might have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And so I think Andre was at a crossroad. I didn't do my time markers, y'all. It's off the cuff. I'm not even gonna do it. I didn't do my time markers, and this app that I'm on my phone don't let me see where, you know how YouTube kind of lets you see the pick so that you know where to stop. I don't even know where to stop. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah. So that was that. Oh yes, another thing. Where we run into problems, and I'll leave it at this. Another reason we run into problems trying to fix the issues of our past, like what we grew up with, our parents, our experiences, in our future relationships, is because they're two different people. So even though they may have similar issues, like you may have an alcoholic or you may have an abusive person, their quote love language, or how they express themselves, or how they manipulate you, may be different. So according to Lisa, her father, even though he was so strict and he was a disciplinarian and all of these things, he would allow her to drink, which was, and so she would drink. She would, feed her alter ego, as she said, created these alter egos. And the father would have, when friends came over, and look at Lisa go. So this would be the part of pride, her being able to dance and entertain. So she took this to get acceptance elsewhere, this dancing and entertaining, according to what they're saying. But if the father, let me see how I can say this. When she got to the relationship with Andre, she was looking for him to love her, quote, as she was loving him. So they were saying anywhere she went, he would she would get him a souvenir from that place, a teddy bear, whatever the case may be, and give it to her. That was her expression, like they like to say, quote unquote, love language. She says his is he gives you the thing that's nearest onto him, that's closest onto him, that's nighest onto him. So for instance, he gives her his Super Bowl ring. So when she goes looking for him to love her, quote, the way she was loving him through all of these sneaker boxes, which is the final straw according to the narrative, and she sees that when you buy me something, it means you're thinking of me. And he's saying, when I give you what's most precious to me, then that means I'm thinking of you, not everyday things. And that is what tipped the scales, according to her. And then and that in the fact that they had a physical altercation that day. What I found telling though is that when I listened back to one of the news reports, because y'all know me, I'm like, well, wait a minute, this ain't making sense to me. When I listened back to the news report, they said it was June 9th, 1994, where she lights this fire. Well, according to, she's born in May. So 2 weeks prior would have been her quote unquote birthday, right? Not quote unquote, it would have been a birthday, a date of birth. And so you're in a time where you're reflecting, this is when I'm born, I'm in this relationship, I'm in this back and forth abusive relationship. She says he was leaving her at the house, he was going out with women, and he didn't want her to go outside. This is also places where you can see you're abused. He didn't want her to go outside, he didn't want her to mingle, but he could go outside and mingle and do whatever it is that he wanted. But she says she was okay with that. So the thought is that I'm okay with all of these stringent rules that you have on me, and the least you could do is think of me. But she was already aware that she was in this abusive relationship. So this is what kind of like tipped the scale. Again, I didn't watch the Burning Bed movie because YouTube is tripping and they only show you little scenes. However, they do have the scene where she, the woman just goes buck wild, she blacks out and, she flames it up. I say all that to say our past leaves cookie crumbs to our present. A lot of times we say we don't understand what is happening or why it's happening, and 9 times out of 10, it's coming from something that has transpired, something that has been said, something that is not being said, something that has happened from our past. So it behooves us, if we can get as many details and information as we can, to be able to map out where we've been, where our parents been, where our grandparents been, where they're coming from, what areas that they're traumatized in, because usually wherever they're traumatized in, they will pass on. I'll give you a prime example. My grandmother, most I rest her soul, she would always say, ever since we was little kids, little children, don't follow friend and company. Don't follow friend and company. Like that was her mantra. And I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Of all the things that, grannies could say, don't follow friend and company. That's a mantra. That's a mantra. So apparently, so I'm like, me, I'm a little bit inquisitive. Like, what's going on here? So I hear the story that when they were back in Jamaica, her oldest son followed friends to take somebody's cow. So you got to be in the country to take somebody's cow, right? And so something befalls him because the friends leave him and he's left holding the bag. And that triple situation seems to has traumatized her so much that now it becomes a cautionary tale, a moral of the story, something that you're going to pass on. So this injury in one place, Wagwan. Yo, you gone? Later, yo. Later, mama. Yo, later. Drive safe. That was my brother, y'all. This injury, this injury in this particular space is something that now not only did her son endure, but she internalized it and she passed it on to her children, which would be my mother and my aunts, and then they pass it down to their children. And then even though you didn't steal the cow or you didn't get in trouble for the cow, this area is something that is hammered in. So, for instance, if people have injuries in areas of relationships, the men leaving the women to fend for the children, then you may have that mother being more stringent in this area to say, hey, make sure you have your own da 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 da. And you're like, well, why are they saying this? They hate women? Are they feminists? Da 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 da. No, this is the area that they're injured in, and this is the area they're looking to protect. For instance, you ever see a little child drop in the ground or they hurt themselves, all of a sudden they hyper sensitive about the area where the injury occurred. You don't even have to go nowhere around it. You can touch them on their shoulder and it happened on their elbow. They're like, oh. That's kind of the same thing we do with circumstances and situations. We over we become hypersensitive and we look to overprotect in those areas so that that same thing doesn't happen to us again. And if we don't deal with the source of it, then usually it happens to us. Even the very thing that we don't want to happen happens. You understand? And so you follow the line, you follow the trail. If it's in the area of money mismanagement, you may see somebody who's overcompensating in that area. You may see somebody who's a miser in that area, but you'll be able to tell in this area is some imbalance. Why does when you look at your uncles and you look at your aunts, you look at your cousins, you look at the landscape, right? You look at the landscape and you say, and then you look at yourself. But at first, sometimes people can't see themselves. So you look at your landscape and then you look at yourself and then you say, what is a trend in this family? You know what I'm saying? What is something that happens? Oh, it happened more than one time, more than two times. You'd be like, that's kind of strange. You know what I mean? And you start asking questions. And then you begin to see, what this is coming from someplace. And that's what the book, It Didn't Start With Us, talks about, which I didn't get to finish reading through. I don't even have the book here. I don't have the book at the house, but that's what that book deals with. So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's my analysis. I'm cutting it short, y'all. I'm not gonna stay long on this, but that's my Soulonomics analysis on Hopelessly in Love. Lisa Left Eye Lopes and Andre Reisen is that it's a repeat of what they both experienced, and they did not deal with the source issue, and it manifested in their relationships. And she was finally able to do what she wanted to do to her father, to him, but it in the sense of burning up the house, even though she didn't intend to do it, it was subconscious because those thoughts were in her subconscious, according to her sister, based on the movies that they meditated on and the situations that brought those thoughts about. And hopefully we're able to learn and grow from them. You know what I mean? I'm still looking at the R. Kelly thing, but I had to put that thing to the side because I don't know what, for some reason, it just. I mean, I can overview it. I'll just overview it because, yeah, about all of that. I already did a lot of information on that. So if you did miss it, it's called Unraveling R. Kelly. Um, I did a lot of information on that because his is a whole nother different story. Whole nother different story. So with that said, thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for allowing me to share. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the box. Put it underneath below. Tell your mama, tell your friends, tell somebody. Let's learn something. The one thing that is beneficial for so-called celebrities is the ability, the visibility to look at these things uh, without hindrance. You know what I'm saying? Because of the position that they're in the mind's eye of society, and because people feel the need to want to look. And so I'm like, if you're gonna look, at least get something from what you're looking at. You know what I'm saying? At least get some, take some home. You know what I mean? Something for you to look around your own environment and be like, I wonder. So with that said, everybody have a blessed night. We shall return. I'm gonna take a little more time, and then we'll come back and read Josiah Henson, The Real Uncle Tom. All right? One.